So, Michael Leckie, Mark Bowden here with our Career Ask Me Anything. And as you may know, this month we're doing a bit of a political spin on our Career Ask Me Anything. We're looking at some of the events that have happened in politics recently and talking about how there is a political aspect to what it is that we do with people in organizations all the time. Or, of course, we don't just do that. As you probably know, Mark works with politicians. I think you work now with what, 5 or 6 sitting G7 prime ministers. Yeah. So here's a question. As most of you will know, we just had what appears to be a recent United States attempted assassination of the former president and candidate for president again, Donald Trump. So here's a question that's coming around that. Around emotional response, such dramatic events often evoke strong emotional reactions, which can influence voters' perceptions and decision-making processes. In this case, some voters may feel sympathy for Trump, potentially boosting his support. So the question I think is really in there is, how do things happening like this, dramatic events, and the potential emotional response of people impact how we're perceiving that leader? So in this case, how do you think people will view Trump through the lens of someone who just got shot at, and what will that change positively or negatively? What might we see him do as a result of that?
Yeah, look, you would hope actually that any human being sustaining, such an attack as this would evoke empathy in more people than not, because that's the human condition. That actually, even regardless whether we see somebody on our side or not on our side, with our values or not with our values, we're designed to always have some level of human empathy for them. It's a much better way of surviving than having zero empathy whatsoever. Now, then the other element comes, but when we're making important decisions about who our leaders are, whether they be political leaders or business leaders, whether they be ideologies or just ideas for a business, surely emotion should be completely detached and we just go on the numbers. We just go on the policy. Well, you can't have it both ways, because in business and in politics, people are often saying, well, that politician doesn't have enough heart. Or, well, that leader, they don't understand the emotions of the people around them. They're just looking at the numbers. You can't have it both ways. So we have to suspect that in politics and business, of course, people are going to vote, and of course, they're going to make decisions based on intellect and their heart and their emotions, and that's probably as it should be. But of course, if it's not your candidate, if it's not the leader that you like, whether it's business or politics, you'll probably go, no, they shouldn't. Should just look at the policies. So whenever you look at these emotional situations, it's best to kind of just for a moment detach yourself, suspend your judgment and go, what would a reasonable human being do in this situation, regardless of somebody's ideology? What would a reasonable human being do in this situation? And maybe that will be happening right now, and maybe that's okay, and maybe it's in balance with everything else that's going on. Michael, what do you got on this one?
Well, it's interesting because, I've heard, comments about this, all along the spectrum of, God saved him to I can't believe they missed. And what's interesting to me is that you're right. We should have a certain level of basic empathy for each other. And so we shouldn't want, if you're virulently anti-Trump, you still shouldn't want him murdered, right? Or if you're virulently anti-Biden, you still shouldn't want him murdered. And if the level of discourse you have around this, and maybe this is me being preachy, so forgive me, but this is what comes to mind. If the level of discourse we have is only non-empathetic, like, boy, I wish they'd just gotten it 3 inches to the left, what we might realize about ourselves is that we are now a part of the problem and not a part of the solution, because there's no way we can have what any disagreement or discourse needs, whether it is in politics, in society, or in an organization. We can't have the dialogue we need if we can't see each other as human beings and have a basic level of empathy, even if we disagree. When I work with someone, I've seen this happen with executives. They like develop an enemy on the leadership team. I'm like, okay, they can be your opposite and your nemesis in their beliefs and approaches and their policies, but don't treat them as if they are just bad and evil, because there's no way for you to hear when they might have something useful to say, and that might put you in a bad spot. I had someone coach me once, something that was really interesting. We were talking about someone that I had a real problem with in this organization. And he said, well, what's your theory about her? And I said, what do you might think? He goes, give me the nasty, the theory that's deep and dark in your heart. I said, well, she's a blank, blankety blank, and she's out to blank me. He goes, okay. He goes, and maybe that's true most of the time. Maybe some of the time, maybe most of the time. But if it's not true all the time, and you don't have any other alternate theories about her behavior, that is who she is to you permanently, and there's no way back. He said, so what are some other alternatives? Well, maybe she's threatened by me. Maybe she thinks I'm underqualified and don't bring enough to the role. Maybe she's worried about the organization. So I went through these other theories. And then once I had those alternate theories, I was able to, when she did something that really set me off emotionally, I was able to pause and think about what an alternate theory might be, kind of collect myself, and then to respond to what she was saying, but not respond to her and not treat her poorly or badly afterwards. What was interesting is in that relationship, eventually she was asked to leave the organization because she couldn't do likewise. And I was seen as somebody who, despite being in a very different place, was reasonable and you could talk to. And she was seen as someone who would just fight for her own way until the very end. And the very end was, they said, she's too inflexible to have in a leadership role. So for me, I think when I think about emotional responses, we need to make sure that we have the right emotional responses, and if we're not, we need to think about how is that not maybe working for me as well as it could be. Anything else to add on there, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you can't have conversation without the converse being there. You can't have debate without an adversary there. It's an important part of democracy. And if you see America at the moment as a democracy, or a republic democracy, then you really have to understand that you can't go enjoying the killing off of the other competitors. That's not the way democracy works. The way it works, to my understanding, is the people get to make a vote and they get to decide, and somebody with a gun doesn't get to decide at all. So me personally, I'm glad. I'm happy that it wasn't on target. It shouldn't have been on target. It would be a horrific thing if it was on target, because without that, there is no debate, there is no conversation at all, and you do not have a real, true democracy. So, that said, enjoy voting and vote however you like on that one. Now, if you want to talk to us, you want to vote for us, then put your questions down below somewhere, or go to michaelleckie.com/ask and make your choice there as well.